Alright, we're back to texturing here. We're going to start with our head. We're going to do some slightly more to what we've done so far. So in the first step, we've just added simple materials. So if I open up my file in Photoshop here, all I've really done right now is just kind of masked out each area and applied a material on a different layer for every single kind of texture and element and color that I want. I made sure to name all these guys individually. So base is just my ambient occlusion map, and then I went on from there with eyes, hair, horns, skin, all that kind of stuff. I highly recommend you name these properly, since we will be taking these into Mudbox, and if you like, you can use them in Mudbox. If not, you can use them as a flattened kind of image as well. So I did that. I spent a little bit of time cleaning that up and my normal map as well. Let me just show you my normal map here. So same deal. I just kind of went through, got rid of any bad looking areas, made sure my colors were correct and all that. So let's get into Mudbox and start painting this up. So we're going to just start with the head right now. We have some seams in the body that we'll touch up in a little bit too. But so I have my head right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hide my body here. And what I've started to do is I've started just to detach some of my elements, like the horns, the eyes, and I'm going to detach the head. So I'm just going to, or the hair. I'm going to select the element of the hair using the element select tool. I'm going to select detach and call it hair. Now the reason for that is while we're painting, even though these guys are all in the same texture, we may want to just paint the bottom of the horns, or paint a little bit under the, like the skin under the hair without actually affecting the hair. So we want to do all that without messing, parts of other texture up. So instead of having to do masks and stuff like that, we're just going to select them, we're just going to separate them out as different objects, and then we can bring them together later on. So I'm going to select all those pieces. I'm going to go to File, Export, Export Selected. And I'm just going to export that onto my desktop somewhere here. Goblin head. Just going to export all of these here, and I'm going to pop open Mudbox, and I'm just going to go to File, Import, and select Goblin Head. And it's going to give me some errors for my eyes just because they're pinched, but that's okay. So right now I've turned off my lighting. I'm going to put that back on. Oops. There we go. So that's what your guy will look like. You won't have any textures or anything applied to him. Which is okay. So the first thing I like to do is just go to my material presets and just pick, I kind of like the one that it starts with. It's kind of basic. That's kind of what you want. You don't want it to be anything too fancy. I don't recommend you try and paint with like a metallic material or anything like that. Keep it on what it is. If you're getting the little red dots on your eyes or any other part of your mesh, you can go to display and turn off mesh errors. Sometimes it'll show up. And I'm also going to go through and, well, I'm going to keep the lighting the same. You want kind of broad, simple lighting at first. You don't want to obscure any part of your mesh in shadow, because it'll be really hard to paint your textures on. So we have our objects here. We have all our different parts. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply material on this guy. So what we're going to do is we can use the default material if we want. You could just rename it and called Goblin. Actually, Goblin head. If you don't want to use that one, you could always just right click and then go to assign material, and you could do a new material if you'd like. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this Goblin head here, and if you select your meshes here on material override, from null, change it to Goblin head, so that way it'll use this material specifically. And what we're going to do is we're going to get this looking like our Photoshop file. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply our Photoshop file onto this guy. So what we can do is click this little new layer button up here. It's a little piece of paper with a green plus sign. We're going to call this our diffuse layer. We're going to do a 2048. Just my head's going to be a 1024, but I like to work in a higher res just to be able to keep that detail and then bring it down later on. Instead of a Targa or anything else that's by default here to save as, I'm going to save it as a Photoshop file. and it's going to go into my diffuse channel at first. So we have that. We can start painting on this guy already if we wanted to, but that's not what we're going to do quite at first. What we're going to do is we're going to bring in all the layers that we had from Photoshop. So I'm going to right click on this layer, and I'm going to go import channel from PSD, and I'm going to select my Goblin head diff. And what that's going to do is going to bring in all my layers. Unfortunately, it brings them in backwards. I'm not sure if there's a way to swap that over. So I'm just going to just swap these around. Most of these don't matter, aside from the base. It needs to be on the bottom, and my top layer here needs to be up on the top. So now we have all our layers that we brought in from Photoshop. We could turn those on and off. We can paint with them, and kind of go from that. Now, our model looks okay right now, but it's definitely still missing some of its details. Now, you kind of see some of the little work that I put in on the horns and things like that, and on the hair with the ambient occlusion. But it'd be really nice to have a normal map in here as well, just to be able to at least see the details that you're working on. Especially when you simplify a model this much, sometimes it's really hard to see what you're going to be doing. So we're going to bring our normal map in here too. So we're going to do this again. We're going to go to new layer, the little paper, the green guy down here. We're going to do normal. Keep it as a 2048. We'll keep it as a Photoshop file too if you like. You could do something else. And from your channel, we're going to select normal map, and this is where it's going to get put into. We're going to hit OK. Now by default, it's not going to have anything because we haven't done anything to this. But what I want you to do, if you go to your object list, select that material that you've made, and you'll see here that under diffuse, it's blank now because we have the diffuse that we're using already, that we're going to be making in here, so we don't need to load anything in there. But we also now have a blank slot under normal map. And if we start painting, then it would kind of use that. But what we could do is we could hit this little button right beside it to load a normal map. And since we won't be painting a normal, we could just load it in here and just have it as a reference. So I'm going to go to the same my file directory here. I'm going to hit Goblin head norm that I've created. And you'll see it starts looking a little bit better. You start getting your normal material or like information there, but I don't know if you notice, it just looks a little off. Like I'm getting some really weird lines around here, and it's just kind of looking a little funky. The reason for that is that by default the compatibility is set to Maya and Softimage. We want to change that to 3D Max so it kind of mimics the kind of environment that we created our normal maps for. When you select that, you'll start seeing that your stuff looks way better. My face looks a lot smoother. These details in the horns here came out a lot nicer, and my hair looks pretty good there too. So there you have it. We have our normal maps in here too. Now we can work on those as well if we need to. Now taking a look at this, we have some kind of funky misshapen parts of the beard here, which after I'm done painting, I'm gonna go in and in 3D Max and model out my beard to match some of these shapes a little bit better. So those are things you might want to take a look at as well. Little bits like that, a little bit of cleanup always helps and makes your model look nicer. Some parts of my hair and things like that are a little low poly right now too. I think I've optimized a little too much. So I might want to go through and just bring back some detail after I'm done my textures. So let's take a look at what we can do here. Number one, what I like to start with is just kind of what we did here with base color. I like to take the next step up. So let's go to layers. We have our diffuse layer here that is currently blank. That's just one that we made in Photo or in Mudbox. You can minimize this normal map thing. There's a slot here. We won't really be using that for now. So I'm going to select my diffuse. I'm going to go to my paintbrush, and I'm going to save this file just so I don't lose it. Goblin head paint 01. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're just going to paint some big broad gradients into our file, or to our head right now. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use my brush. I'm going to use a fairly big brush with kind of like a really soft fall off like this. And I'm going to use it on this layer here. I'm going to use kind of like a complementary color, a little bit of red, a little bit of pink, something like this. I mean, it's a little bit brown. I might even go a little pinkish with that, something like that. And if I start painting in some areas here, I could start painting in under the eyes and just start getting some darkness in there. But now you'll start seeing that, hey, my eyeballs are getting pink and I definitely don't want that. Well, that's when separating these guys into different objects comes in handy. You could right click on this guy, go to lock. Let's lock off the horns and the hair. And now we can actually just paint on our skin. So I'm going to rename this layer to skin tones. And what I'm going to do in Mudbox, you can also play around with layer styles, much like in Photoshop. So I'm going to select something like Color Burn, right, and kind of start seeing what kind of effects I might be able to get with that. Let's take a look here. Oh, my layer is off here, of course. I turned it off by accident. So with Color Burn, I'm going to get a lot of a darker color. Right? And you just kind of go through these and kind of decide what you want, right? This is kind of nice, a little bit of screen, kind of keeps your original color. A little linear dodge is quite nice too. Overlay does a really nice job as well. I think I'm going to pick something maybe like a soft light. I just want like a little bit of just, even I'm probably going to turn my strength down here and just paint in just a little bit of like darkness around the eyes. Again, my guy's a goblin. He's not supposed to be very healthy. He's supposed to be kind of worn out a little bit from fighting and things like that. So I'm just going to go through and just add a little bit of, maybe he's got a bit of frostbite, some wind burn, that kind of stuff. Maybe it's like some old blood, either his or whatever. And I don't like to use blacks. They're just too dark. I like to use something a little lighter usually. All right, put in a little bit of color around anything that intersects your character. So things like beards and items and stuff like that. If you have, like goggles or a mask or something like that, nice to do a little bit of darkness, little fake shadows. All right, kind of what your ambient occlusion did, but just a little bit lighter. Something like that. Let's just throw some of that in the ear. My ears have some really weird normal maps going on over there, so I might have to go through and just clean that up eventually too. Some things you just don't see until you've been working on them for a little bit. You start kind of noticing that stuff starts looking funky. So there you go. You kind of try and embellish some of the features of your character. You don't want to paint lighting right in there, but a little bit of tone is nice. And play around with some different colors. It's really fun just to go a little off and try and add some different tones to your dude or your lady or your robot or whatever it is you're working on. Yeah, a little gross there, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of gross. Alright, maybe we'll do a bit more of a brighter pink. Maybe get some of that on the lips. He's a goblin, but he's still going to have a bit of, he's kind of looking like lipstick right now, but that's okay. We can always tone that back. Maybe give him a little red on the nose. Maybe he's drunk a little. Yeah, if you're finding that the stuff you're doing here is a little too strong, you can always use the eraser tool to kind of just go back a little. Or if you find that this stuff is just strong overall and you're not really, you're kind of digging it, but it's just a little much. You feel you've just kind of, hit him with a makeup shotgun. There's a little strength number here, and you just turn that down. 30%. It's just kind of like your opacity of your layer. So if you just want like a little bit. go. And if I still feel that's a little strong, I could go to my paint erase, put my strength down, pretty low, and just start kind of easing back some of this detail here. There we go. When you have a really nice ambient occlusion and a nice normal map, you really don't need to add too many details in like noise and actual texture. Sometimes it's just good enough just to add a little bit of color to your guy, and he'll start looking a lot better. I'm going to add actually a little bit of red to my ears as well. Make him look a little windburned as well. Maybe a little, maybe look him a little warm or something too. There we go, just a little bit of color. Alright, there we go, that's looking pretty good. So why don't we just unlock the hair here, unlock the face. And let's do the same thing for the hair. Let's just add some gradients. I'm going to just add a new layer. I'm going to call it hair tones. Save my file here. And this one I'm just going to go, maybe like a dark blue. All right, this one maybe I'll do an overlay as well. Let's see what that looks like. Let's just add a little bit of color around the horns there. Maybe a couple little streaks there from that. Maybe a little bit of darkness around the ear. A little bit of dark on the bottom. All right, help push out that idea that it's kind of under shadow and whatnot. Yeah, a little bit of dark around the chin there. Sometimes it's nice just to have a bit of a gradient on things. Sometimes you just want to do like a really big Alright, something like that. Alright, let's just do a little bit of dark behind the ear. There we go, and if I'm not really happy with that, I can always go through and again just play around with some of these layer styles here. Maybe maybe I do want it just to be a multiply, just a bit of darkness. Darker color would definitely go more blue. All right, and so on. So let's just maybe keep it as an overlay, and then also maybe put this down to like a 75. There we go, just a little bit of color. So let's lock that. Let's unlock some horns and do the same thing for the horns. Horn tones. And for that one, let's do a bit of a brown. So I'm just going to keep on diffuse for now, and we'll kind of play around with it as we get there. So I'm going to kind of add some darker tones right around the base where it's going to connect to the hair, make it feel nice and rooted. go. Let's take a look at that. It's a little, a little contrasty, so maybe I want to go through and maybe use the blur tool just to kind of blur that out a little bit. Just make it a little bit of a nicer gradient. Maybe go through and then just with a smaller brush, do a little bit of stronger detail again on the bottom. Sometimes, your blur can blur out a little too much. There we go. And I'm just going to get a bigger brush here. And small, not a lot of power, and just kind of add just some coloring onto this guy here. Let's take a look at that. Don't want to make it, too even from the bottom. Add a little bit of variation. There we go. So let's take a look at what we have so far. So far we've just added some color and we have a pretty good first step. Looking back at this now, maybe the skin tone is still a little much. There we go. I think the horns are probably they need a little bit of color there. Do like a 50 on them as well, maybe a little higher. There we go. So that's kind of a decent, base layer of color. Nothing too crazy. I mainly was dealing with just darkening up areas and all that. So my next step, I might just brighten up some areas. And so for that, I'm just going to make another new layer. I'm just going to call it overlay or something like that. I'm going to set it to overlay. And then with my brush, I'm just going to select a fairly bright color. Could be a little bit of orange yellow in there. And then what that'll allow me to do is as I paint, it'll just brighten up areas. So I could just go through and add a touch of brightness to certain areas. Again, doesn't have to be a lot. Just areas that you might want to have stand out a little. There you go. And this one I'm just doing all together because it's very, very subtle work. I'm just going to go through and add a little bit, a little bit of bleaching, a little bit of white, Just a little bit of variation there. Maybe do a little bit on the hair as well. Maybe he's going a little gray or something like that. Let's get some nice gradients going up in there. There we are, just a little bit of something there. Again, just playing around with gradients. Nothing too crazy. You know, and again, this one might have been a little too much, which they usually are when I make them. Just bring that down a little bit. And it's all about just doing a little bit of gradients here and there and all that. So there we go. That's looking all right. I'm just going to save that. So it really depends, you know, how far you want to take it with your character, how much detail you want to go in on. I'll show you some of the kind of little things that we do to help push our characters. One of the things is to help outline some edges. So I'm going to just make another layer. I'm going to call this just edges. I'm going to select a fairly bright color, like a white, and I'm going to select a really small brush with like a sharper fall off, and zoom in on, say, let's some of these horns here, and a little bit of something like that, and just do a little bit of, might even increase my strength a little. Just do a little bit of edge work on here. And just help push out some of these areas that would be kind of worn and torn with my brush here. Just, you know, help push those really high areas out. And you know, you want your spec doing a lot of that stuff and your lighting. But sometimes you might need to just go through and just add a little bit of care. All right, we'll probably be taking this down opacity wise once we're done too. All right, so I'm just gonna go through and just touch up these horns a little bit. Just do a little bit of. Okay, this might even be a little too big. Right, just, you know, help your normals do their work. You know, bring a little bit of attention to the areas that you want. Now, if you have trouble painting up and down or left and right or whichever way you kind of prefer or don't prefer, you can hold Alt, Control, and middle mouse, and it'll let you rotate sideways. So if you just want to paint, if you really enjoy painting left to right, which most people do, you can just do this. So that's Alt, Control, and middle mouse button again. Sometimes it's hard to tell what you're doing with the specular and different lights. So what you can do is you could hit and hold space, go to lighting, just put on flat lighting, and you know, sometimes it's hard to kind of tell where you're working on, especially on things that are normal map reliant. But sometimes it's necessary to kind of help you get through some of these things. Sometimes lighting can just, you know, cause trouble and make it hard to work. It's also nice to see your texture as a base. It helps you kind of understand things a little bit more. You know, if you're like, oh, these this gradient here around the horns is really deep or something like that, it's really nice to just kind of look at it as a diffuse on its own. So let's hold space, lighting, flat lighting. You turn that on and off. So go through, add some nice highlights to your mesh. Alright, so things like that, like pock marks, scratches, stuff like that. You go through and you know, even do that to the eyes a little bit if you want to just give them a little bit of reverse mascara. So I kept my character really simple. I didn't do a lot of, you know, wrinkles or crease marks in there. If I had, I would probably go through and you know, push out some of those details in there. Right, like these nose areas here. I just go through and add a couple little things there. Right, might help just kind of do that. If you find your dude just generally glossy, my guy's really, really glossy right now. He looks like he's been sweating heavily. You go to your object list, select your material head, and play around with your gloss and spec settings here. Right, how how broad do you want that gloss to be, and then your specular as well. If you just want to turn that down, just so it's not as in the way. You could do that, and we'll paint up some gloss and specular maps too in the next tutorial, just to kind of, or in the upcoming tutorials, just to kind of take a look at what we can do with that and how that can help or hinder the creation of your character. So just go through again and just add some little details. Doesn't have to be a lot, just little bits, and you can set this guy to an overlay. It'll kind of blend in with your colors a little bit better, and you probably want to put him down to a lesser tone as well. So, I didn't add a lot, but it helps. It helps tiny little things. I'm going to do the same thing with the reverse. I'm going to do dark edges, and just set this guy to multiply. And go through and just kind of do the opposite, really. Right, again, just gentle little edges. Maybe my guy does want a little mascara on the inside. Right, help the eyes stand out a little bit. There we go. And go through and do that with the hair as well. Just add some nice dark lines. These ones could be a little bigger too. In between some of these little crevices, help the ambient occlusion catch things it maybe missed or didn't pronounce as much as you would have liked. Right, so just go through and add some nice little details like that. A little bit of hair. There we go. All right, so I would probably go through and just do that to different parts of my hair here. Just help push in some of these guys on the inside. Right, just like that. A little bit of something. So same thing. Set them to multiply. Probably put them down to 60 or something. Just a little bit like that. And then we could go through and start adding some details. Now, if I was going to do a cartoony pass on this guy, I might just start a new layer and do hair separately. Hair lines. So I might go through here and just, again, select a black brush. And I might just start, even doing like a bigger... I think my stamp spacing is a little far off because I'm getting some weird Funka patterns. So I might go through and just add just some hair, depending on how much detail I want. You know, just a couple lines, doesn't have to be a lot for something cartoony especially. This is probably a good time to hide my or lock my head in. So I'd go do that, you know, maybe do some dark lines and then start doing some brighter lines as well. All right, just add just a bit of bright line. I can go like really deep with these if I like. I'll use a stencil. Make sure I'm not using a stencil. It does look like I'm using some sort of pattern or something. It's really weird. What do we got here? Well, anyways, this is going to paint some more lines in here, so just spend some time. Again, if you want to do a little bit of that. Right, a little bit of lines like that, and if you don't like anything, you could always go through and just start erasing. Alright, sometimes even putting it on like 100% erase is nice. Sometimes I like to do that where you just kind of add some thicker strokes and then use the erase tool just to kind of wean them back in. I find it's a nice way of getting really crisp edges like that. There we go. So again, just go through, add a little bit of detail with your line work and stuff like that, and go through that. If you wanted to make your cartoony or your dude look kind of sketchy, you know, I could add a sketchy layer, go to my tool here, select the black marker, right? This is definitely doing something really funky. But I could go through and start adding, you know, if I wanted like little pen marks. All right, you know, have some fun with your character. If that's kind of what you want him to be, you know, go ahead, right? Just add, you know, little scratches or etches, right? Like you drew them by pen. All right, you could outline certain areas as well. If you want to make them look kind of Borderlands-ish or something like that. All right, you kind of decide where to add some edges. That one's not very good, but I can clean that up. All right, so if you wanted to do something like that, totally could. There we go. So again, that's just a quick little pass, you know, making your dude look a little cartoony. So you could do that. And then if you wanted to just add some actual, you know, fine details to your character, a little bit of noise, a little bit of grit, let's add some dirt. So, you know, you could go through here with your paint, and you can even select like a funky brush and start, you know, painting in some kind of detail here. Let me just lock off some of these guys. Say we wanted to add some dirt in there. You could do this, you know, you can try and push in some of this detail here, put on some randomize, right? Try and get some kind of gritty noise, but this stuff usually looks a little funky and not all that great. So I'm just going to right click on my layer here, and I'm going to go to clear selected. Just going to destroy that. What I'm going to use instead is my stencils, and the stencils are really cool because I can, if you select the stencil here, you'll take a look at this guy. There probably isn't a ton of really good skin ones by default, but you might have to, you know, import some or find some interesting ones if you want to do like a really gritty kind of a character. So let's take a look at what happens here. So this is it basically overlays a texture onto your canvas, and when you paint, it's going to paint in the details that are white. Actually, let me just turn off the. So you can see there, it's starting to paint in all that detail. That is white, which means is everything on this one. So if we want to do the opposite there, you could always take here and invert values, and it'll just paint in those little guys there. And so you can do that. You can rotate your canvas, you know, start painting in some other guys. Right, you want to paint from like a nice angle for that part of the mesh, because if you paint from, you know, if I painted the under eye from here, it'd look really stretched because, you know, I was looking at it from the top. So you gotta spend a little bit of time and care with this kind of stuff. I'm doing like a really quick, dirty job here. You know, it's a nice way. I can, you see here, there's a Q to hide stencil, and then all these guys here will let you know how to, you know, you can do S plus middle button, you can move this guy, left button, you can rotate them, and right button, you can scale them. So there's a bunch of options you have in there too. So let me just hide them for now. So now you see I've just added just some general detail to my mesh without having to paint all this stuff in, which would be a pain in the butt. And it would also be really hard to go into Photoshop and actually try and paint all this in, you know, keeping the proportions the same and all that. So we can go through and maybe do some of that for the hair as well. So let's take a look what we got here for stencils. We got some craziness, some noise, which probably look bad. We do have some hair, which looks like a guinea pig hair. It kind of looks like our big guinea pig. So let's take a look here what this will look like. This is kind of a tough little process here sometimes. So let's try and align some of this hair here. There we go. So as you start getting to the edges, it's obviously going to look bad. So you're going to have to go through and start, you know, picking. You know, don't get right to the edge on stuff. But anyways, if you really want to add a lot of detail to your character that way, I'm not a big fan of just adding random hair and stuff like that. But I do like adding some noise and things like that to your character. It's nice. It just helps. You know, definitely not necessary if you're doing like a cartoony character. But yeah, let's say we wanted to add a little bit of scales to this guy. Oops. Of course, I have them locked. Right, and your pen pressure will control opacity too, so if you do it nice and softly. Right, I might actually do that as a separate layer later on if I just want to add a little bit of scaliness to them. So let's just undo that. Let's go back to the hair. Let's find a nicer general noise kind of texture. What is that? That's kind of cool. It's like a splotchy. I don't know if that would really work for the hair. Yeah, maybe I'll just do this as well. Again, just adding general noise to my character. I could even take a bigger brush just add some, again, general noises, not really anything in specific. It looks like some of my cracks made it over onto the hair. So I might have to go through and just delete out. Oops. Yeah, don't do the, don't get too close to a border. And try and keep the scale of your noise the same throughout. You don't want to be, you know, zooming in and out too much from your character because it can look, oh, just like that, can look really bad. All right, there we go. So let's take a look at that. We got a little bit of detail in there. All right, let's lock that hair down. Let's unlock these horns here. Oh, looks like I've hidden my mesh. I didn't even realize I did that. Just gotta be careful. I'm using a really big brush for these horns, and you can see that once in a while I get some streaking because my texture's just a little too different. So let's just show all. There we go. All right, there we go. So we've added some crazy little detail on there. Add some to the eyes if you want to, which doesn't make any sense, but yeah, I'm not going to do that. It's crazy. There we go. So we've just added, again, just like a layer of noise over everything. And you can just go through and just add, you know, different ones. Like, where are those cracks? Those were kind of cool. Ooh, that's a nice one too. I like that. Let's see if we could add some interesting details. So I'm going to just lock some of these guys here. Yeah, you could always do this in new layers as well. That way, you know, won't screw you over if things go wrong. There we go. Let's add some detail to this other horn. You can see I'm just using a part of this map here, just this dark part, just to get some nice details that I want. So let's rotate that all the way around. There we go. A little bit of detail like that. Let's see what else we got here. We had those cracks somewhere too, which were pretty cool. What are these things? Little splotters. Where are those cracks? I could do something like that. Let's take a look. Just a little bit of cracking. All right, there's some, add some cracks. It's kind of cool what details you could pull out of, random textures and things like that. So be on the lookout for basically anything. I mean, that's the cool thing. You can interpret, like bricks into cracks for horns or stuff like that. Just be on the lookout for just shapes that you like. It doesn't have to be, again, exactly what you want. I don't have to look for broken horns to get patterns that I want for what I'm doing here. So yeah, be really, start getting really good at just picking out details that you want, what you think you'll need. There we go. So let's take a look at that. Now I could always go through and clean this stuff up because it did add a bunch of side details and things like that. So let's just do like a slight fall off and just do alright, just kind of clean this up a little bit. And if I really wanted to do a great job, I would take those cracks into Photoshop and clean them up before I brought them in as a mask or a stamp, and I would get much better results. I wouldn't get all this noise up on the side of them. So sometimes it's to make one texture, you got to make a bunch of other textures and then kind of work your way through that. Totally worth it. I mean, you got to do what you got to do to make your character look awesome. So sometimes the little bit of extra work can go a really long way. And the cool thing about stencils and things like that is you have them forever. You have them for all your other characters and things like that. So it's never a waste. You're always going to have them for something. So there we go. We have like our fairly realistic-ish horns. With our crazy face here. Our dirt's pretty strong. I'll probably put that down a little bit low. Horns as well. Kind of bring that in a little bit. And let's just take a look at what else we can do with the stencils. They're pretty great. I mean, you go quite far with getting some interesting details. So even just shapes and things like that. Even like this guy here, if you're doing like a cool robot or something like that, oops, you can add some really neat looking details. Right now it's kind of weird, like a basketball, but you could always add some weird stencil-y things like that. It's kind of cool. Yeah, if you wanted to add some wrinkles, you could totally go do that. Wrinkles you got to be careful with because you kind of have to understand, where the skin is going to go and where it should go. There we go. A little bit of wrinkles there. Again, probably not something I want for my character, but something you can add wrinkle wise or something like that. You could really, I mean, you could spend forever having fun with stencils and just adding some interesting kind of details, even like this. If I wanted to add some liver spots. Obviously that's a lot. But oops, something like that. Kind of looks cool. It's a little weird and cartoony. I kind of like it. I think I got a little bit on my hair there. That's okay. There we go. Just a little bit of something. Again, sometimes you can just have fun just finding random stuff. This actually might be pretty cool for my hair. I just wanted to add just like detail like that. That's not very good. Let's see what else we got. We got some bricks and more of this. Yeah, there's some nice detail in here too. Say I wanted to add a little bit of dirt to the nose here. I could just go through here, lower down my strength, and just add a little bit of just a wee little bit of texture here. Pick areas where I feel he would be a little, torn up, or where you'd be getting some older skin. Maybe a little bit around the forehead there too. Go. I'm just kind of going over the hair too, just give it a little bit of extra grit and detail. All right, a little bit of stubble kind of looking stuff down here. It's looking a little bit like a statue. That's all right too. Might be kind of cool. There we go. So that's pretty much it. I mean, I could go to town. I mean, I could spend forever, just adding details and things like that, which you probably will want to. And that's totally awesome. There you go. A little bit of cracked and torn skin there. I don't really like that. But anyways, that's kind of the idea. So that's that. And the last thing we're going to do here for the head is the eyes. So I usually don't like painting my eyes in Mudbox, the actual like pupils and stuff like that. So I'll kind of show you what I do. So what I'll do is just make a new layer here called eye tones for one. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of color to the eyes as well. Now my eyes will probably be rotating if I'm animating this guy, so I don't want to add a ton of stuff. maybe just a little bit of pink. I'm actually going to leave my eyes white for my character because I really like how he looks without pupils. But you may want to add some pupils, and there's a few ways we're going to go about doing that. Actually, I'm not going to make a new layer. We're actually going to just do that right in Photoshop. So I just added a little bit of color. There we go. So that's our character. When he's done and you're happy to go and all that, what we're going to do is we're going to export this out as a Photoshop file. So I'm going to export my texture here from my head. Now I've been trying to export it as multiple layers, which Mudbox says you should be able to just by selecting your diffuse, go into File, Export All Paint Layers, and you should be able to export them all individually and have them go into Photoshop as layers. For some reason mine won't let me until I merge them, but that's okay. I mean, for the most part, this is all I really need, is just to get a texture out of them. So what I could do is I could right click on diffuse, go to export channel merged, and just save that out as a target as well. I'll put it back to where my tutorial files were. And I'm just going to overwrite my goblin head diff because I don't need my AO anymore, so I'm just going to overwrite that there. There you go. If I open up that guy in 3D Max, let's take a look at him here. So he's still using the old texture, so let's just update that here. There we go. So that's in there. There's a little render of him, so he's looking pretty good. His details are nice there. And what we could always do if we wanted to go the extra mile is export some of these layers out individually, these cracks here. Bring them into Crazy Bump and just do like a slight little bump for all this stuff and then overlay it on top of my normals. Or your normals, and that way you'll get you'll kind of get what you like out of these in your normal map too. So let's add some eyes onto this guy. One last little step here. So in Photoshop, I'm going to open up this diffuse. Now my eyes are right here. You can tell because of the little pink that I added in there. Now if I didn't want that pink, or if I wanted to get rid of it, I could go into Photoshop here and just remove that as well. Which I might do just for today's purposes. So let's just go ahead. I'm just going to just white this out for now. The reason for that is I'm actually not going to do multiple eyes. I have currently both of my eyes unwrapped to different areas here, but I really don't need that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just find an eye or paint myself an eye here. And put it right in the middle and re-unwrap my mesh to match that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start off by drawing up a circle here. This will be my my pupil here, my retina. And let's just fill that in. Let's give my guy some red eyes. Maybe something a little bit like that. Oops. And put that up on a new layer. There we go, let's do that. I'm going to double click on my layer. I'm going to do an inner shadow, or sorry, an inner glow. Change that to normal, dark, and then just set that a little, lower the opacity. Just pull up a picture of an eye, photo of an eye, just to start mimicking how you like. Now you can hand paint all this stuff too, if you like, but I'll show you like a quick and easy way just to make a simple eye. I'm going to duplicate this this layer here. I'm going to hit Control T to transform, and I'm just going to shrink this guy by holding Alt and Shift just to the center. Let's give him a little pupil there. Double click this again just for the middle layer. I'm going to do color overlay. Just going to color that black. I'm going to do a little bit of an outer glow on this as well, a little dark. Just to kind of give it a little bit of softness, not a lot, just something like that. There we go. So that's kind of what we wanted from that. And let's give ourselves. I'll show you the eye that I'm using as a ref here. I just pulled this up on Google. It's nothing too fancy, just an eyeball. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some of those cool streaks going in there from my eye. We could do that in a couple different ways. I'm going to just make a new layer. I'm going to create a circle. Fill that in with just like a white color. I'm going to filter, render. I could do render fibers. I haven't done this in a little bit. Actually, let's just do render clouds. Filter, render clouds. And I'm going to go to filter and just going to do difference clouds just to kind of get them a little deeper. And then what I might do is just go to just redo that filter. So I'm going to just do difference clouds again, and that's just going to keep, oops, clicking the wrong button here. Just give that a bit of a crazy kind of look like that. Just hit Control F like a whole bunch of times, just difference clouds over and over until I got some nice kind of contrast on there. I'm going to go to noise, and blur. I'm going to go to well, I guess change this. Let's see what iris blur is. Oh, not iris blur. That's a terrible idea. I'm going to go to filter, blur, and do, where are you here? Radial blur. And do zoom, and just zoom the hell out of this stuff. Oh, well, that did not do what I wanted it to do. There we go. So I had to actually have this selected, so I just clicked on my layer here. Just radial blurred. Probably do that a couple times. I'm going to put a multiply on this layer. Maybe a multiply, maybe not. Just going to shrink it down. Just so it's more or less the size of my eye here. Let's try a different layer setting here. Probably don't want to multiply. Maybe do something a little brighter like that. And I'm just going to duplicate that layer. Hit Control T just to transform it. Just rotate it around a little bit. Something like that. And I could go to things like image adjustment, brightness, contrast, and just contrast that up just to change it up a little bit. And that's the basic eye that you can kind of do. Again, it's nothing too fancy. Might do an outer glow on this too, just to soften that up a little. And if you're having any trouble with your lines here, these two guys, if you're having just like a really weird outline, you just go either take the mask tool or eraser tool and just gently erase. Where are you, history? Oh, it's on the outside. Right, you could either maybe even smudge that a little bit. Just push that in a little just to get rid of some of those bright areas there. There we go. So let's just say that's our eye and we're happy with that. I'm going to just flatten this image here. I'd usually save all my layer stuff just so I don't lose it. I'm going to save that. Go back into 3D Max and let's take a look at what we can do here. So I'm going to select my model. I'm going to add an unwrap modifier to it. Open that up. Select my goblin head texture here. And let's take a look at our eyes. So we have these two eyes here. I'm going to select this bottom one here. I'm going to move it right over top. So because we don't actually want a unique texture for each eye, or in my case anyways, I don't care that they're over top of each other. I'm just going to put them right in the center of this guy, and then I can just scale them until I get a size that I want. Now if I'm finding that this is just way too big, and my stuff's starting to go on the outside, then I'm gonna have to either shrink this pupil or kind of find a different way to deal with that. So yeah, you can make tiny little pupils or giant pupils or whatever. Again, that's kind of a quick little overview of re-unwrapping parts of your mesh for your eyes and stuff there. These guys are okay. They could use a little bit of coloring and stuff like that. But like I said, I kind of like my dude with just white eyes, so I'm probably going to keep just these guys white. But for you guys, you can keep what you like. I kind of like how he looks like that. He looks a little blind or something like that. So I might actually go back and re-export it out of Mudbox to get the little pink back in the eye there. But that's it. So there we go. We have our head fully textured. We could definitely go really far with this and keep going with it, but I feel for now that's pretty good. And we can move on to the body.